tail swept a third of the stars from the sky, tossing them to the earth. Welcome to Revelation chapter 8. We're looking at this final trumpet mentioned in this chapter, the fourth trumpet. And then after this, an angel flies saying, "Woe, woe, woe," because of these remaining trumpets. Here's what it says. Then the fourth blew, and there was stricken, but this could be tied in with beaten, a third of the sun and the moon and the stars. And a third of the day did not shine, and also the night. So I really tie this back into the heavenly battle where the dragon takes a third of the stars. So a third of these stars are fallen stars, and they need to be beaten because of their sin. And so we seem to be seeing this effect now on earth, where first there was this heavenly battle, and now that the day of the wrath of the Lamb has started, there's like 7 years from the start of the battle, 2017, when we saw the sign of the Virgin, and she has these two sets of 1,260 days. And now, up to 7 years later, we're seeing this effect down here on the earth with just like all kinds of remains falling on the earth and burning up all the greenery. And then there is like this imagery of the beast that the woman sits on, because he gets his head chopped off and get it cast into the sea. It's kind of like part of Babylon that gets cast into the sea like a millstone, because she's sitting on this beast that has 7 heads. One of its heads is wounded. So I tie this in with the beast, a great mountain burning with fire. And then this is also burning with fire, a star fallen from the heaven. So more like the neck, the female worm, like the body of the harlot. So this would be like the heads that are coming out of her, because it's really like one animal, but the mother being Jerusalem, she rules over the rest of the land. And then here, I think we see represented the father, the mother, and the stars, like the suns that are following them. And we look up the meaning of this to see that it could mean like beaten, stricken. Then we see that like they need, like this is some kind of punishment. And this really then ties in when we read this here. Then I saw and heard a messenger flying in the heavens, and he cried out with a great voice, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, because of the sound of the shofar, which the 3 messengers still have to blow." So now when we look up the word woe, one woe ties in with the dragon. Woe to the earth, because Satan, that dragon of old, is cast down to you. That is Revelation 12, where we learned about this heavenly battle. And this is just talking about the 3 woes here. So the dragon is the first woe, the 5th trumpet, just one woe, as I understand it. But for Babylon, it is woe, woe. So for Babylon, it says, pay her back to her as she has done to her, pay her back double. So she's getting 2 woes, which would be the 6th and the 7th trumpet. Or you could see that the 6th trumpet is double that of the 5th trumpet, and also the 7th trumpet is also double. The 5th, 6th, and 7th trumpets are all woes. And so we see these 3 references to woes in the rest of Revelation that don't deal with these trumpets. So we're tying this together. The 5th one seems to clearly be the dragon, which was cast to the earth, arriving because he's called the morning star. And then this Babylon, with the sixth trumpet, they're coming from the location of this Euphrates River, and we understand it to be like the Milky Way. And with the constellations, we've tied it in with like Scorpio, which has the star in it, which is Apollyon destruction. So it's like this abyss. So they're arriving like dead. And so the fourth seal is death and all of Gehenna following behind. So it's like this judgment on the dragon, the beast, and Babylon. But for Babylon, what happens to her, how she is paid double with this seventh trumpet, it seems that whatever light she had, like she drinks of the blood of Yeshua and the blood of all the saints, but then they take that light from her. It says that they leave her desolate and naked. So when Eve were desolate and naked, it means that they lost their light. That's one understanding of it, because it's similar. The word for light, or, and skin is very similar. So before they were probably clothed as light, and they lost their light. And the serpent was the most naked of them all, which is a play on words with cunning. That is similar to being naked. So she now is the most naked, like they've stripped all the light from her because she had all this blood of Yeshua, the mother Jerusalem, and they're eating her flesh because she was like drinking the blood of the prophets, and they want to feed off of her life. So that's how they're like the army of the undead, as I see it. So woe and double woe and quadruple woe to her, because they're completely stripping her of all of her life, like their own mother, to live because of her. And this is interesting because in the third trumpet, if we're tying this in with her, it is called a scarlet worm. So this worm willingly gives her life so that her children live. So they're feeding off of her flesh, making her completely destitute and naked. So interesting that this like mother harlot is like, if she's willingly giving her life, being this scarlet worm, then they're also feeding off of her flesh and living because of her. So this second woe here, the sixth messenger, when we look at these woes, how she gets double woes, it's also like 1810, it's woe woe. 1816, it's woe woe to that great city. And 1819, it's also woe woe. So that's all those references. So here is the sixth, which is like double one woe could be two woes, but then if you also double it, the seventh messenger could be woe woe and woe woe, like four. So we get to the seventh messenger sounding. It says, the rich ones of this world. Tie this in with Laodicea, who thinks that they're clothed, but he's like, you're naked, you're destitute, you're blind. So this being the assembly, I believe, of the great tribulation, and the way that they live is they willingly give their lives. They're like this scarlet worm, to die by the sword. So just like in heaven, they are turning on their own mother, killing her, also on the earthly Jerusalem. But this Jerusalem almost seems like a sort of safe place, where people can live there and burn the weapons. So it seems like the enemy doesn't want to come near this center of heat, because they've seen what has happened on the day of the wrath of the Lamb, where he's already poured out his wrath on this harlot. So with the seventh messenger, it says, the rich ones of this world, all of them came after our Adon Yeshua. And so she's drunk with the blood of all the saints, the prophets. She's the one who kills all the prophets. And he will reign from everlasting and unto everlasting. But it says, so tie this in with now her being completely stripped of that light, of that privilege. And what is the reason why the leaders of the Jewish people didn't want Messiah to be understood to be Messiah is because they knew that they would lose their position. The Romans would take away their position. And so it should have been like this stewardship of the vineyard to keep it until the rightful heir comes. But they didn't want to give up their position, so they didn't want people to know who Messiah was, even though people were like clearly following after him and believing to be him to be Messiah. So they just didn't want to give up their position. So that's like Messiah is the only one who willingly is able to take all that glory and give it back to the Father. It's just a temporary position. So the leaders need to all be willing to give that credit to Hashem, to God, where it belongs. Otherwise, it just gets taken from them anyway. So I see this as like 4 woes, where now she's completely stripped and naked. They'd come after Yeshua and the saints, but now she's like that, coming to that hour of wrath where it's about to all be poured out on her with these bowls, and his saints have been taken out because it happened right before the sounding of this 7th messenger. So the harlot, not only called a female worm here, but also learning that this word for bitterness and knowing that it's bitter water sounds like the name Miriam, Jesus's mother. So there's like this virgin aspect of Jerusalem and this harlot aspect, but he's taking the place of the harlot because he is then stripped of his garment and clothed in scarlet, and also taking the place of the dragon, because he says, just like the serpent is lifted up, even so I must be lifted up. So he's taking the place of these fallen stars. So let's read verse 12 in the Hebrew, Weharevini, and the 4th, Tekiah, made that Tekiah blast, Wenelaka, and was stricken. So this has a kof, which is similar, eclipsed, and I pulled up this word because our footnote here says smitten or possibly eclipsed. So the word for stricken has 2 of these letters, lakui, which would be inadequate, faulty, deficient, defective, spoiled, and stricken. So like these words in Hebrew could have relations with each other. And the word for smitten doesn't actually seem that similar. So looking up this word nalke, samples of it is translated as beat or lashed. So to make sense of it, like how people translate is they'll say, well, the sun can't be beaten, but that takes away that meaning because we know that 1/3 of the stars of heaven have fallen. So if they want to just say eclipsed because it makes more sense, that's nice because that might be physically happening where it's obscured, where the sun isn't actually 1/3 of it permanently gone. And that's possible, like there could be volcanoes and things here on Earth, so we can't see the sun, or the sun could stand still, so 2/3 of the world do not ever get light. That would be pretty bad if it stands still even for 22 days for this day. Like it says there's no more time. So in order for there to be no more time, then our planetary bodies should stop moving or are unable to be seen, something like this. So maybe on this day of Hashem, it's just a time period and not a literal 24-hour day because we don't have time. So, but this imagery of being beaten or lashed. So again, we have this imagery of how Messiah, by his wounds, we are healed. He was taken to have like one beating short of death. But if this is, since it's a third of the stars that fall, that maybe is talking about kind of like angels being beaten, the dragon being beaten, the harlot being beaten. Also, during this time, since we have this, it tells us what the symbology is. So even if it's also literal, we also know it's like a third of the angels. So that's how it gets used here. And I didn't see an exact, but here is forms, that could be forms of it, to be stricken, to be beaten, or to be afflicted with disease. So he says of the harlot in Revelation chapter 2 that she gets thrown into a sick bed and her children die. So this ties in also with this feminine harlot, because it says people who drink of her, this bloodied water or bitter water, that they die. So this is like her sons die, and she's clothed in Adam, which is man. I don't know if it's like the same word there. So she's like the mother, and I don't know, it's a tie-in with how she's actually not dressed in scarlet, this word, but Adam. So anyway, her children are supposed to die. So continuing then with verse 12, and this just says that there were some letters crossed out, this footnote here. Ha-Shalish, the third, Me-ha-Shemesh, from the sun, We-ha-Yarikh, and the moon, We-Chochavim, and the stars, We-Shalish, and third, Me-Hayom, from the day, lo, not Zarach. Shine is how it gets translated. Wegam, and also ha-laila, the night. So then the word for shine, the one that gets chosen here, could also mean glow, dawn, radiate, rise, bloom. So it makes it seem more like it's a seed too. It's a little similar, zera. So like the sun is blooming, blossoming, growing in the sky where it's not dawning. I don't know, it's a little similar. Zeroah. So it's not like rising, which might mean it's not like moving around for that time frame, because at the end of the day of Hashem, the sun shines super bright and men get stricken with intense heat. So this seems to be just like the day, which could be 22 days, might start with 10 days of darkness, or a time period of the sun being obscured, so it's like it's nighttime. And then there's like where the throne is revealed, and so this would be like intense heat for people to almost be standing in God's presence here on earth, where all this is being now seen. So moving on to verse 13, where Ra'isi, where Shamathi, and I saw and I heard. Malach, angel, Ehaz, one angel. Now in our translation, it's going to say eagle, but it does tie it in with a constellation, which is like this swan, the swan's final dance, its final act right before destruction. Here, a messenger crying, but also right before the bowls are poured out, there's a messenger. Maybe there it's a bird, I don't remember. But we'll see what our manuscript says when we get to there, because here it doesn't say eagle, it says a angel. One angel, Rahaf, fly beshamayim, in the heavens, wetzach bekol, and cry in voice, gadol, great, oi, 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 whoa, 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 le, oilu, ha, da, rim. This would be the dwellers, but this is our weird word that actually means ram. So I don't know if it's typically used this way at this time frame in history when John was writing. So here is to dwell, ladur, and here is what ail translates to: a ram, buck, deer, stag, hart, reindeer. Um, and those, this is actually like, this is kind of ail. If you stuck a yod in there for some reason, he's sticking a yod in there. So also the word for cry, le, sa, litz, ngok, for he is crying in a great voice. To those, the dwells, ngal, upon haaretz, mi penei, from the faces of hakol, the voice of hashofaroth, the shofars, shesar yim, translated as to blow, ngoz, still, le tekiah, to do the tekiah sound, ha shelosh, the three, malachim, angels. So shesar, these are words for blow. None of them really I found to match, and typing it in was just like, that's right. So an odd choice here. It is almost a little bit like Mitzrayim. Reek is maybe a little bit like the word for moon. So here, this could mean shatter. So with Gideon, they had those torches that were concealing the light, and they shatter the vessels. So it's like a shattering, which the blasts or the noise that these three angels make might be like to shatter vessels to reveal light. Or it's like a straight place, which could be what the shofars are, because you're blowing through a straight place, which is what Mitzrayim is a straight place. So Yashar is like the straight, honest, somebody who is upright. So that's the first two letters here, are the shin and the resh. But to see the tzadik and the resh, it's tsar. So this is where we kind of tie it in with more with Mitzrayim, this kind of narrow straight. So mention that because there is a tie-in. If these are like plagues, then these end time plagues will recapitulate those of Egypt and can be found in the Midrash Rabbah. Behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause it to rain a very grievous hail, such as not been in Egypt from the day it was founded until now. However, there will be one like it in the time to come, when, in the days of Gog and Magog, as it is written, a torrential rain and great hailstones, fire and sulfur. So interesting to note that these hailstones are always in conjunction with this voice being heard as we're moving to each level. The voices, thunders, lightnings, and then it progresses to like hail and earthquakes, always in like conjunction. So it's like from the throne here as we're entering into each segment. Consider the function of the Egyptian plague. So it's like all coming from this voice, from this sound, from this here, the shofar. It's not specifically saying woe, woe, woe to those because of the sound of the shofarot, which the three messengers still have to blow. So a shofar. In the well-known song Deinu, it would have been enough for us, from the Passover Haggadah, says that God, through the plagues, judged both the Egyptians and their gods. He did this by turning against the Egyptians the very things they worshipped. So in this day, everybody's casting aside their idols. So what the merchants were all looking to was this mother harlot. And they're like, whoa, now we're ruined. Nobody buys their merchandise anymore. So it's like these 10 tribes or 10 horns turning on their own mother. But then, like, it's almost like this beast that she's sitting on, though, the 10 horns being part of this, they're ruined now because of it. But I guess that's how they were able to live, because maybe they were defeated. So they, for some reason, they feel like they need to destroy their mother. It all starts with the destruction of this mother harlot. They worshipped the Nile River and it became blood. They worshipped beetles and they got lice and locusts. I was learning that the scarab could tie in with the Cancer crab, that in the Egyptian, where they have these constellations, it's a scarab, so it's like tied in with immortality. So people making deals with these angels, thinking that they'll get immortal life to escape death. In the Tanakh, I think is talking about it. But it's like a trick, because the devil can't actually offer these things. So all this immortal life gets taken from them. And they worshipped, instead they get lice and locusts. So it's like your manna breeds worms. They worshipped frogs and found them in bed. They worshipped the weather and had their crops destroyed by hail. So this seems to be happening both literally and also like to the spiritual beings, like the stars representing angels, the sun and the moon. So we understand that there's always this correlation with heaven, earth. So we can't just say this is only spiritual. I believe that we'll see, however big the impact is on the spiritual, we're also going to see this in the physical. And in fact, our entire physical existence should be like rolled up, destroyed, caught on fire. One woe to those who dwell on the earth, because the devil has gone down to you having great wrath, knowing that he has a short time. Two woes to the merchants who were made rich by the harlot's luxuries, because there's no more buying. And the fruits which your soul lusted have been lost to you. It's like a famine. There's no joy. There's no voice of the bridegroom anymore. So woe to the merchants. In fact, quadruple woe, because of the great city. And here is the final of that quadruple. So all of the shipmasters, anyone who sails, so in 1 hour she is made desolate when these bowls are poured out. So this transition in the middle of the day of Hashem, where he's taken out his saints, and now it's time to pour out the judgment on the harlot. Thanks for joining, and Hashem bless you.